All right, Matt, welcome to the show. So tell us about where you're from and how you ended up being here in Utah with us.
I grew up in Southern California. I was born in San Diego, and then when I was really young, my folks moved to a place called Menifee. No one knows where it's at. It's kind of in the Inland Empire. People call it the IE. But yeah, I went to middle school, high school, and then I went on my mission right from there. Came home, went to school at a city college in Long Beach for 2 years. And then right after COVID hit, I got into a sales gig, and that eventually led me to Utah about 2 years ago.
Sweet, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I know you played volleyball pretty seriously too, like in high school, college also.
Yeah. So I originally I I wanted to play football. That was my thing. I fell in love with football when I was in maybe eighth grade. But being tall, skinny kid, I grinded, but eventually I just didn't have the size to compete with those guys at a higher level.
Totally.
Interesting thing enough is my football coach forced us all to play like an off-season sport, and everyone was running track or playing basketball. I had probably zero interest in all those sports. But my mom actually, she played here at BYU in I think it was like the late 70s. And she's like, you should try out for volleyball. I was like, I don't even know if they have a men's volleyball team at my high school. Isn't that like a girls' sport? Oh, no way, you should try it. So long story short, I tried it. It was just a good hobby for 2 years.
How old were you when you started?
About 14.
Oh, okay.
So my freshman year. I wanted to keep playing football, so I was like, you know what, let me give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I was playing football and volleyball for about 3 years, but my junior year, I realized I had a lot more passion for volleyball than I did football. So I decided to just quit football altogether. I started playing club, and that kind of led me to playing in college after the Mish.
That's sick. Yeah. I mean, I've heard California produces ballers. I know, like, at least at the college level, like, California's where the best teams are at and stuff. So,
Yeah, it's
really
definitely
competitive.
it's a beach sport,
Yeah, that too.
so you're gonna find it more towards like the beach cities. On the East Coast, you have a bit more.
That's a great point. Yeah. Okay. And why didn't it work out?
No, I mean it did work out for me. I just ended up after COVID, I couldn't play sports. College was halted, everything. I was about 23 at that point, and I got into the sales gig, and I loved it. I started making money, and I was like, oh, I like this lifestyle.
Yeah.
Eventually it got to the point where I was like, it doesn't make sense for me to try and go play pro overseas for uh, very little to no money.
Yeah.
Just to chase that dream, and I kind of pivoted and went all in on the sales gig. So.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more money in door to door than there is in volleyball. But
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, some guys at your highest levels in Russia or Italy, they're making six figures. But yeah, I probably wasn't going to get to that point, to be honest.
Right on, dude. Well, that's sick. So you got into sales, and it's been door to door. How long you been into that?
This is going to be my fifth year doing door to door. Crazy
Awesome.
to think about.
Was it all consecutive, or did you take a break? Or
Yeah, all consecutive. Doing pest control, I took a little, like a 7-month hiatus, and I sold solar. But
nice.
My good buddy Mason, who's currently my business partner, he wrote me back in and sold me on the division doing pest control, starting a branch. So here I am.
Awesome. So that's what brought you to Utah, right? Is this what the business is?
Yeah, it's funny enough. I swore that I would never move to Utah, like a lot of people do, but it just kind of made sense. Most of my friends were moving here for either school or work. Funny enough, I had another buddy from San Diego. He got a job at Motorola here, just moved here last year. I was like, wow, there's just so many people flocking into this
Everybody's
state.
here.
Yeah. But yeah, basically for work.
Okay, there you go, man. That's sweet. Now I gotta get your thoughts on the comparison and contrasting. Okay, so tell me your favorite thing about Utah and your least favorite thing about Utah.
Okay. Oh, my favorite thing about Utah. Dude, honestly, for me, I've only seen half of the spectrum. I'm usually gone in the summer times, right, for work.
Oh, true.
But I love snowboarding. I love the mountain. Like, that's been my go-to hobby since I stopped playing volleyball. Kind of helped fill the void of playing that sport, and I just fallen in love with it.
Fair enough. Where do you go?
Man, they're all so good, but probably my favorite is snowbird.
Okay.
Snowbird, Snow Basin's up there, but Brighton's probably where I go the most.
Got you. I've only been a couple times, and I just didn't have the patience to get into it and get good at it, but that's sick. My wife goes all the time.
Really?
loves
Does she
skiing.
ski or board?
Ski, yeah.
Is that what you tried?
No, I tried snowboarding. I
Really?
snowboarded like 3 times. I went 3 times, and I broke my wrist twice. And so I said, I'm just not going to
You
do
broke
it.
your wrist twice. Wow. Yeah, that's just bad luck. Maybe at that point, it's a sign maybe to try something
Yeah,
else.
dude, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not coordinated, but
Yeah. Interesting thing enough, in California, snowboarding is a culture, right? Like everybody snowboards. It's just a culture thing. And then I came to Utah, everyone bags on snowboarders. Like skiing's a big thing.
yeah, it's some kind of like, I've seen on the internet too, like a big snowboarders versus skiers contrast. What's that about? What do you know?
Dude, I couldn't tell you. I think just from the very get-go, skiing was invented first, and that's
Okay.
what all the ritzy folks did.
Yeah.
Just for fun, and really, you had to have money to do the sport. And people that started snowboarding were more so like your rugged, hillbilly or hippie type.
Yeah, that's kind of what I don't know. Like when I picture like a skier, I picture some like wealthy, well-dressed person going up for a ski trip. When I picture snowboarding, it's like dudes, long hair,
Smoking
young,
weed.
yeah, just up on the mountain, just yeah.
Right.
So okay, maybe that's where a lot of the beef comes from. That's interesting though. But you're
Yeah.
snowboard all the way.
No, I love snowboarding, but I recently just got into skiing this last year. My roommate's a big skier. He helped me fall in love with the mountains. His name's Clayton. I've done sales with him for a long time now, but he's an awesome dude. And he convinced me to hop on skis, so I've tried it a few times. It's a blast. But
Did you first start snowboarding and skiing in Utah, or did you do that in California before?
in California,
Okay,
actually,
okay,
yeah,
right
at
on.
Big Bear.
Where's that at?
It's in the San Bernardino Mountains, probably about 2.5 hours from the Inland Empire.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Dope, dude.
So
Okay.
it's quite the drive versus 40 minutes up to the Cottonwoods.
Yeah,
here,
you got
know.
a bunch of options. How about least favorite thing about Utah?
Least favorite thing. Man, that's a tough one. I love Utah.
Okay.
If I was going to say least favorite thing, maybe more so just I think this is a good thing, and it can also be a bad thing depending how you look at it. But I love, this is something I love, but also could be a negative, right? Everyone in Utah has this very big desire to just get ahead.
Yeah.
I think everybody's trying to invent the next big thing or do the next big thing, do something to stand out, which I think is great. But I think at the same time, a lot of people get lost in that idea or that vision of just trying to be exceptionally, I don't know, maybe, I think it's good to be unique, but at a certain point, it's like we're all cut from the same cloth at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that. What are some like specific instances you can think of where you've come across that?
No, good question. I think it's more so when people do that, they can lose sight of maybe just the purpose of life, like the purpose to be here, and they get lost in the maybe even just the mundane. I know I've even seen myself a little bit. I'll use myself as an example of trying to reach wealth or financial freedom or just this vision of being great. I've seen maybe a little bit in my relationship with my family, friends, people that I was closest to maybe dwindle just as a result of not having a good balance. I think people just lose sight of what's most important when you're chasing a big dream or an idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, 100%. That does make sense. And a lot of times it's easy to see that in other people and not see it in yourself as it's happening. So that's really cool that you
I
kind of
appreciate that. That's a
notice
good
yourself
point.
and all that. How about your favorite place to eat in Utah?
Man, I'm a Cali boy to the bone.
Okay.
I will always go back to In-N-Out. I probably eat there about
Yeah.
4 times a week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Dang,
I'm
dude.
an addict. Yeah,
You must be
I'm-
worked out a ton then or something, huh?
I try, but I'm not very consistent with it. I was more so in college, but I don't know. Favorite local spot is probably True Religion in Orem.
Never heard of it.
Really, you got to try it.
Yeah, that's right down the road from you. What do
No,
they
it's
do?
not far at all. It's like breakfast, brunch. I don't know if they serve dinner. Amazing steak, though. If you go there for breakfast, get the steak and eggs.
Okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
go, dude. It said True Religion, huh?
True Religion, yeah.
Okay, sick. I like
Anyone
that.
that lives in the valley right here has probably heard of it, but I love that place.
Okay, good to know, dude.
You're lucky if you can find a seat there in the morning, but you got to give it a shot.
So all things considered, do you like living in Utah or no?
No, I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it. I love the people. I love the mountains. Just love the scenery. Like waking up to the mountains is amazing, man.
That's great, man. So tell me some fun facts about yourself. Maybe lesser known things that people don't know.
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if this counts as necessarily me being a first generation American, but my dad, he's from Sweden.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, you didn't know.
I didn't know that at all.
That's
No.
funny. He's funny enough. He just got his citizenship about maybe 3 or 4 days ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it only took him 40 years. But my mom sent me some photos of him at the immigration office getting sworn in, and he was just happy as can be.
Sick, dude.
My dad's a patriot. He loves his country. Like, totally made it, the American dream.
Yeah.
And it's just cool to see him get his citizenship.
So what brought him to America? How old was he?
Oh, I think he was about 34, 35 when he came to the States.
Okay.
So
For work?
he spent about half of his life in Sweden. But he met a girl, and he moved to Ohio, got married to her. They were married for about 5 years, and then they divorced, and he moved to California, met my mom.
Heck yeah, dude. That's awesome, man. And tell me more about your family. So you got your mom and dad. Do you have any other siblings?
I have a little sister.
Okay.
Her name's Emma. She is 19. She was going here to BYU for a while, and she's just taking like a gap year, little hiatus. But she's my only sibling. She's adopted. I love her to death. She's just an awesome character.
Yeah, man.
She teaches me a ton every day. It's been cool to see our relationship kind of grow over the years. Pretty big age gap. She's about 7 years younger than I am. Growing up, we were never necessarily the closest. Just, hard to find things to relate to when you have that big of an age. But it's been awesome in adulthood to kind of get closer. She lives in a vineyard. I live in Saratoga.
Oh, right on, dude. Okay.
So, about 15, 20 minutes. She's over at my house all the time.
What are the odds your parents come over to Utah where you guys are at?
Ooh,
High?
I'd say right now pretty slim.
Okay.
They live in Rogers, Arkansas, right next to Bentonville.
Oh, they're not in California anymore.
No, they made the move to leave about 2 years ago, like a lot of Californians.
Yeah, that's true.
But my dad's always said, he's like, man, I left Sweden because I hated the snow and hated the cold, and I don't want to move back.
Yeah, fair enough, dude. Good for him. Arkansas. You watch basketball? They just had that crazy run in the tournament.
Oh, I haven't been able to keep up. I've been so busy recently.
Yeah.
It's been tough to keep up with sports in general since I've entered the working class.
Sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of your biggest pet peeves then.
Ooh, biggest pet peeves. I'd say my number one is when people chew their food with their mouth open.
Okay.
That's my biggest one. I can't stand it when I'm out to lunch or dinners. Man, I tell you, especially on a date, that's
oh, dude, come on.
Turn off for me.
Yeah, it's hard to think someone's attractive when they just got this food in their mouth and they're talking.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'd say another one is when, everybody loves to talk a big game in general, but, words are cheap. And I hate when people say they're going to do something and then they never do it. I personally have been victim of that too, but I'd like to say made a lot of improvements in that sector.
I like that. Okay, that's cool. Tell me about your earliest memory.
Probably I don't know if this is the earliest. It's hard to piece together that timeline so far back. I remember when I was, this was more so like a traumatic experience for me. I was probably about 4, maybe 5. My family, we lived on a worm farm, believe it or not.
Did not know that. Wow.
My parents wanted to be entrepreneurs and started a little business harvesting worms for soil in Southern California.
Dope.
And so we lived on like a little trailer on this worm farm, and I was just out playing. I can't remember exactly what I was doing, but I found this like a box cutter, and I sliced my hand open pretty good. And I remember running to my parents wherever they were on the farm, and they found me and kind of tended to me. But yeah, I don't know why.
That's traumatic, yeah.
That experience so much, but yeah, that might be the earliest.
Well, you said you're 4 too, huh?
Yeah, I was like 5, 4, 5.
I don't know if I know anything in my life before I was 4. It's always so interesting. Especially when I babysit like my niece and nephew. I'm going to go see them today. I'm like, dude, you're not going to remember a single thing. Like, we're taking them to Disneyland this week, and I'm like...
Disneyland or Disney World?
Disneyland. I wish it was Disney World, bro.
Disneyland's better. It's California.
Really? Okay, all right. But no, I'm like, dude, like, this is cool and all, and you're going to, like, enjoy the moment, but I do not think you're going to remember this when you're older. It's just interesting.
It's tough, man. Like, growing up in SoCal, early 2000s, all those amusement parks, theme parks, Disneyland, SeaWorld, Knott's, you name it, they were all dirt cheap to go to, so my family had passes to just about everywhere. I do have a ton of memories going with my mom she loves roller coasters.
Okay, good.
Yeah, my dad hates them, so it was flip-flop, but she'd always take me at least, once every couple weeks to one of those parks, and those were some great memories, but nothing in specific, I just remember going to them.
Yeah, well, and that's what matters. That's good. So you're San Diego, right?
So I grew up in Menifee. It's probably about an hour north of San Diego.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't know why I thought San Diego.
Yeah.
Um,
I usually tell people, I'm from the San Diego area because no one knows where
Yeah,
Menifee
that's
is.
exactly for this exact reason, this conversation we're having.
Exactly.
So that's cool though. So being in California, you went to all those big amusement parks that people make a whole like annual vacation out of. You went to Disney, you went to all that stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's a big benefit of growing up in California is you get a mix of everything. Like you have the beach, you have the mountains, the desert, all the amusement parks. You never run out of things to do. People are always go, go, go all the time because it's nonstop. You can find something to do. That's why the freeways are so congested, I guess. Yeah, it's a really unique place. I'd love to say I'd end up there in the future, but the way things are going right now with just the prices of home and politics, everything, it's tough to say.
Doesn't make a lot of sense right now. California sounds sick. I'd love to live in California if it was easier, but
I think probably most people, if you take out all the bad things, they would agree.
yeah, that's fair. Dude, you know what? Utah needs a better amusement park because I'm just thinking about all these things you mentioned, like, oh, California has this and that. We don't have a beach. We got lakes, whatever. But like, we don't have any.
You don't count Utah Lake as a real lake.
Oh, come on, man. Come on, man. No, I mean like the ones people go boating, like Deer Creek is nearby. You got like Lake Powell down south, whatever.
No, you can't beat that. Yeah.
But like, dude, lagoon sucks. I'm a big lagoon hater. I'll be honest, man.
It's funny. I always hear my friends from Utah grew up here. They're always like, they talk about lagoon, but nothing special.
No,
I can't say I've ever been, but it doesn't necessarily look like a Soak City or a.
Yeah, don't worry about it, bro. It's not fun. So tell me, switching gears, who in your life has inspired you the most and why?
Man, that's a great question. I'd say probably two to three people come to mind.
Okay.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my dad. My dad is like he's a rock, dude. Like that guy's been through everything and he still wakes up every morning with a smile on his face and a good attitude. Like talking to him, especially in my adulthood, it's been amazing to like listen to some of his stories and tell me a bit more about his upbringing. Things I guess he had shied away from growing up, but my dad, he had it a little bit rougher growing up. He's the oldest of three boys, grew up in a single parent household. His dad was a alcoholic.
Wow. Okay.
And he started smoking cigarettes when he was about 11. So, and his mom, she didn't really care that he started doing that. So eventually he just got into drugs and alcohol at a pretty young age. He joined a rock band. My dad's a huge musician. He loves to play and make music. Something I admire about him. But eventually, he found his way out of, that lifestyle, drugs and alcohol. He found that through Christ, through the gospel, which is awesome. But I think about other things that he's been through in life. The dude worked his absolute butt off to make sure we had food on the table every day. He's been through cancer, a million hernias. I mean, the guy's just kind of been through it all. My folks, they lost their house in 2009 when the economy crashed. Mm-hmm. And, I never really knew when I was a kid how much my family struggled during that time. But I always remember my dad just getting up, going to work, never complaining, making sure I always, had enough to just be happy as a kid.
I love that.
Yeah. So my dad is someone I look up to a ton. But another one I think of is, President Harrington. Mm-hmm. He was, our mission president on the mission. That guy just, always gave me the benefit of the doubt, a million chances, tons of wisdom, and just good example of what a follower of Christ would look like.
That's cool. I was never really close with him, but that's cool. You had a good relationship with him.
Yeah, I guess you kind of ushered in towards the end of.
Yeah.
Those are some great people. I guess a third person that's come to my mind. I hope you're all right with me sharing multiple people for this question, but my business partner Mason, he's about a year older than me. He, that guy is just a beast. He's just so on top of it, really, really disciplined in life. Like and it's not my place necessarily to share everything that guy's been through, but he is just another one of those examples of like, dude, you just keep your head up no matter what you're going through. You could sit there and make excuses for your situation and reasons why not to go hit your goals and succeed, but no matter what that guy's going through or been through, I never see him falter. And he's always just going a million miles an hour. You know,
I love that, dude. Yeah. It's always so inspiring to see people going through hard things and, I don't know, not showing it or just being able to still get things done. I think, especially like you talked about with your dad and what he went through and how as a kid you never even knew. I think that's even the most impressive is to not let your kids know if you're struggling financially, to not let your kids know if you're struggling in this way or that way, is to be able to provide a good experience and opportunity for them and not make it about you as the parent. You know what I mean? Kind of turn outwards. I think it's cool.
I think that's something that I wouldn't necessarily understand. Yeah, I'm not a parent, but I know one day when I do have kids, that'll be definitely an example I'll look back on a lot. In adulthood, especially, I'm about to turn 27 in May, so almost like 2 months.
Wait, what day? My birthday's in May, bro.
May 31st.
Oh, I'm 21st. Okay.
21st? Man, I know a lot of people with May birthdays.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The best month. You Gemini?
I couldn't tell you, bro.
Okay. Sorry, I don't play much into that too. I think when I was a lot younger, especially my first couple of years of college, a lot of people think that you're supposed to have it figured out when you're 26, or I don't know if there's necessarily a number that people put to or tie success to, like, hey, I'm supposed to get everything I want by this age.
Mm-hmm.
I know I definitely did. I didn't envision myself at 26 having this many. I guess you could call them struggles. Just the average everyday hiccups that happen.
Sure.
Life is not perfect. Life is something that's fluid. It's something that's always changing, and that's not something itself that's ever gonna change. Nothing's ever gonna be perfect or 100%. And at this point in my life, when you ask that question, I've just thought about people who have embodied that attitude of like, yeah, nothing is ever going to be perfect, but it's my decision to wake up every morning with a smile and just keep going.
Yeah. Huge, dude. So you touched on it a little bit, but tell me about what success means to you. You talk about how people chasing greatness and maybe losing yourself along the way or forgetting what's important as you pursue those other goals. What does success mean to you?
That is such a good question. And I think it does vary for everybody. My idea of success now at this point, when I was younger, it was more so, I'll have the nice house, I'll have the nice car, I'll have time to do whatever I want all the time, go up to the mountain every day and forget about everything else. But at this point, I've come more to a realization that success is just your idea of happiness, like being able to wake up every day and be not necessarily content, but very satisfied with what you've created for yourself. Like that being said, not to sell yourself short, but taking a good look at where you're at now, where you're always making steps towards where you want to be, as long as there's continual progress towards that end goal, I think that's, at least in my eyes, that's what success is. Just always working towards something bigger, better, self-improvement. I spent a ton of time trying to figure out ways to improve.
Well, dude, what you just said reminds me, like, I feel like I, along with a lot of people, spend way too much time fixated on what I don't have and what I did bad at, and I don't appreciate the things I do have and the things I do well at. And I think that comes from an attitude of, well, I want to get here. I need to focus on how and why I'm not there yet. And I think it's good, right? That's how we grow at self-improvement, but also being able to appreciate, like you said, our continual progress, our consistent continual progress at whatever level it is. I love that, man.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I know another fun fact about me. I actually have a life coach, a guy I work with pretty closely. He can just kind of help in mindset, business, really anything. It's really awesome. My mom linked me up with him. His on Instagram is at Glenn Lovelace or at Your Wingman, if anyone wants to look him up. But
yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. So yeah, what does a life coach do for you and how has it helped you?
Yeah, it's really cool. I kind of got to this point. I've been seeing this life coach for maybe a good 4 or 5 months now. I got to a point early December where my mind was clouded with a lot of limiting beliefs. I kind of got stuck in this cloud of negativity I had so many good things going on in my life. I just reached partner at work, got equity in my branch, my company. Everything was going well. I started dating a girl I really liked. But still, for some reason, I could not get myself out of these like negative thoughts, just this cloud over me. My mom, both my parents actually have been through cancer a couple times. And during my mom's chemotherapy, she would have a lot of those same negative thoughts. So she started seeing a life coach, and she mentioned how much it helped her just get through like those processes in her head. So
Interesting.
she recommended this guy to me, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. It's actually something I always kind of made fun of, growing up with therapy or like life coaching. I thought it was.
That's what I was going to ask you is what do you think the difference is with this life coach and therapy? But you can get to that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. I do think there are a few differences. That being said, I haven't been to therapy. I've only been to like coaching. I think the biggest thing that it's kind of done for me is I think as humans, we all have this like system or this mode response in our head that these stories we tell ourselves every day, they could be negative, positive, or just they could be neutral. I think a lot of people get stuck in that negative story. Whenever something's not going absolutely perfect, we start to blame it on ourselves, start to talk down on, number one.
Yeah.
And that just leads you a bit further down the rabbit hole. So I don't know, coaching for me has kind of just helped me rewire my brain to not look at more so the negative or the things that haven't happened yet, to more so, more so like, I guess, positive self-talk, positive future outcomes, like creating more positive stories that I'm telling myself about current situations or possibilities.
I might need to look them up, man. Yeah, I think negative self-talk is an area that I'm great at, and I need to get good at the positive self-talk, and it's interesting the way our brains work, psychology, evolution, whatever.
Well, it's definitely not just you. I think a majority of people like you and me, our minds are just wired that way. It's a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
We want to seek pleasure and avoid pain all the time.
Totally.
And our brain just has a way of doing that might not be the most productive.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I forget where I was going with the life coach thing, but yeah, it's been honestly it's been a blessing. I didn't know how much you could necessarily change the way that you think until I started.
That's sweet, man.
Meeting with this dude.
So tell me then, maybe before you met the life coach, what's a piece of advice you've received that you've followed through on that's like really changed your life?
I think one piece of advice I've constantly heard this over and over through my life, and I think I'm just now starting to internalize it. Going through that kind of like, I know you could call it a mental health journey the last few months, but especially recently, it's just made a big impact. But comparison is the thief of joy. Going back to what you said, how everyone's looking at what they don't have or what they want. Just spending so many years comparing myself to others who a lot of times were much further along in life than me, not giving myself a lot of that grace. I found a ton of joy in just appreciating where I'm at, looking at all the good things that are going on, not just as a whole, but daily. It's like daily blessings, daily wins. Like that's so huge. As I've done that, like my quality of life has improved like 10x.
That's great advice, dude. I've always thought that, especially because like I was in the sales industry for a little bit. It wasn't as good as you or a lot of guys I know. But I'm like, dude, I know dozens of people my age who are millionaires. I am not a millionaire. And so it's so easy when I'm like, I am so far behind. But really, when it comes to income and earnings, I'm probably in a higher percentile. You know what I mean? Or
right.
I'm like, okay, I've got like a wife that I love. I've got like...
How many guys at your age are married?
Yeah, exactly. Like how many 25-year-olds? Yeah. And so it's interesting. Comparison, 100% thief of joy, man. And I forget. And similarly, though, is that a lot of times you can justify yourself with comparing yourself to people you might esteem as lower than you. You're like, oh, well, I'm better than that guy because look what that guy's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
doesn't have as nice of a car as me or doesn't dress as nice.
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah. I'm doing so much better in life than that loser, right? So
right.
you could always think of it on both sides of it. And I think for me, like you said, it's just finding a way to be able to just be happy with who I am and appreciate the greatness I've done, and at the same time pursue it more, pursue more growth. I don't know. It's a very interesting dichotomy, dynamic, especially at our age, especially with social media, dude.
Social media is
like, what are we talking about?
that plays into that.
Dude, it's impossible not to compare yourself a lot of the time, dude. So.
Oh, I have a ton of friends that I'm like, dude, I just sent you this reel on Instagram. Did you see it? They're like, no, I deleted Instagram. And I'm like, oh, well, why hadn't I done that yet? That's a good idea.
Yeah. I've had a hard time talking to you on Instagram, and I was like, good for you, bro. I wish I had deleted Instagram.
Yeah, I know. Oh gosh. Usually I'll doom scroll at 11:30 at night. And stay up for an hour. Instagram really. There's a ton of ways, or just all social media in general, that you can benefit from it. But I think generally, as a social community, it doesn't necessarily have the best mental benefits if you're comparing yourself.
Oh yeah, our brains were not. I don't know, not prepared for something like that. We still got caveman brains, and we're getting the instant dopamine, and it's not a good sign.
No, it's true. I think that can also play into what I said earlier about everybody's, part of this rat race. I think social media has accelerated everybody's desire to have something more, or have what they, don't have, or what they see on Instagram.
Do you think that's greater in Utah than California, or can you not say?
California is a very vain state.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I do, interestingly enough, and I don't know why that is, I do see that a lot in Utah. People are a lot more active on social media.
Oh, yeah.
I see it in a lot of good ways, like promoting their business, or whether it's religious beliefs, whatever it is. I do see a ton of it, but I also see a lot of, you call it vain, or signaling, like, hey, I have this, I'm doing these things, going on these big grand vacations. I do see a bit more of that in Utah.
Okay, yeah. I always wonder, like, man, is this just people of Utah, or is this just people of the world? And I don't know. It seems like Utah is especially good at that social media game and projecting yourself.
I can tell you why. I didn't grow up here, but before I moved here, everyone told me it was like a little bubble. You know? So yeah, it is quite interesting.
So the comparison thief of joy, great advice. How about if you could go back in time and give yourself advice? What point in your life would you go to, and what would you say to yourself?
Goodness, that's also tough. I think about that question. I'm really grateful for all of the steps I've taken, all the learning experience up to this point, and I wouldn't want to change any of that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about myself very specifically when I think I was on my mission. I compared myself a lot to other missionaries, or I don't necessarily know what group of listeners you have listening to your podcast, but a lot might be able to relate to this, maybe not. I'd compare myself a lot to the other missionaries in the mission, just being able to articulate really well their testimony, their thoughts, be able to teach immaculate lessons. And I never thought of myself as someone that was able to do that very well. But that being said, that comparison did, in a way, drive me or make me strive to improve them to be better. But at certain points, it was unhealthy.
100%, man. Thanks for sharing. What's one thing that you wish people knew about you? You don't always get to express the deepest feelings of your heart to everybody you meet. If there's only one thing you could, what would it be you want people to know about you?
Another great question.
What can I say?
Yeah, you're full of them, man. I love it. I don't know why we haven't done this sooner. I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is great, dude.
I can't say enough how cool I think this is, what you're doing.
Thanks, bro.
One thing I wish people knew. I try, and I really strive 100% all the time to treat everybody with respect and love. I always want people to know, no matter who you are, how much I know you, I'm always willing to help and to listen and to love. I try and hold others in the highest esteem, just really, really high regard, regardless of how people perceive me, where I'm at in life. I just love everybody, truly. And that journey is still far off from being perfect, but I genuinely would just love people to know, hey, I'm always willing to talk. I love to make new connections. I love people. I'm a people person. Yeah. I think you have to be, to a certain extent, to do sales or enjoy that profession. There's some people I know who don't love people, but they're still successful.
Yeah, that's true.
Make it work somehow.
That's true.
Just I'm a giver. I love to give and I love to help. Even coming on this podcast with you, I was thinking in my head, I hope this is really helpful for him. I hope we can give some good value and propel your business a little bit forward.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, It's good, and it's also tough when you say like to esteem everybody in the same regard. I feel like it's so easy and natural for us to label people and to think of people in more simple terms and not as complex beings that we are and stuff. And so that's something that I'm also trying to work on a lot is being able to see people for who they really are, not just how I see them or how I think about them
Yeah.
in the few interactions. You know?
Well, what's interesting about the sales industry, you do a ton of training. There's a ton of psychology that goes into it, especially when you're doing door to door. Something that we're always training the guys is like, hey, first impressions are really important. They're accurately or inaccurately made in like a tenth of a second. I think those are the statistics behind it.
Yeah.
Regardless of who you are, that's how we work as humans. You know, we see how someone's dressed and we make quick judgments on them. You know, trying to rewire my brain, I guess, for a long time to get through that and past that. It's not easy, but it's very possible. You know, just taking a step back and asking yourself, like, hey, do I really know this person? Do I know them well enough to accurately make that judgment?
Yeah.
You know, 10 times out of 10, you're probably wrong.
So tell me this, dude. If you weren't in the rat race that we all are in right now, how would you spend your time? Money's not an object. What are you doing with your life?
Ooh, man, I think about this a lot, actually.
Okay.
You know, the rat race is very taxing. It's very, it can be stressful at times. We're all in it, but I think about where I want to be when I'm retired and I don't have to worry about that. I think everybody has some sort of dream or idea of where they want to be when they stop work and have a family, kids, grandkids, whatever it is. I think of myself, on a ranch or a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Interesting.
Nobody in sight, just being able to go and like till the earth, do the things that people did hundreds of years ago when they didn't have social media.
Yeah, back to your roots.
Okay. Yeah, back to the roots, where the things that don't necessarily matter as much aren't at the top of your mind. And then obviously living close to a ski resort, that's a must.
There you go.
I get the mountain every day.
That's sick, dude. I like that. So you'd rather be alone. And that's crazy coming from someone who grew up in Southern California.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of makes sense. You're like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
I want my own space.
It's true. I am a people person. I love people. I love making new connections, getting deep with people. Like I eat this up right now. Like I love.
Good, dude.
I love it. But when I think about, where I want to be, that seclusion does sound very appealing. Like just being able to have that silent peace every day and not worry about the tiny little things that don't matter so much. And the older I get, the more I realize your circle doesn't need to be very big. You can love being social and having a big circle, but ultimately the bigger your circle is, the less meaningful I think a lot of those relationships get to be. And right now, being a door to door, obviously it's a lot of networking, you meet a lot of new people, a lot of young people, which is awesome. I love college kids.
Yeah, dude.
Just this fun point to be in life.
Yeah,
you're figuring everything out. I still am. I'm not far off, but the people who matter the most in life are the people you need to spend the most time with. That could be, your wife, kids, your closest friends, parents, whatever it is. I've found so much joy in spending more time with the people that mean the most to me.
Love that, dude. That's huge. So tell me about how faith or belief in a higher power has impacted your life.
Ooh. Yeah, that's another good one, man. I'll be honest, the last, when I came back from the mission, I spent a few years, I guess some people would say wayward, or, it's kind of like the prodigal son in a lot of ways. And just very recently, I'd say about like 8 or 9 months ago, I started to try and tap back into that spiritual side of me. I couldn't tell you why I was super far off from the path. I don't know, maybe I grew up in a family that's very religious, very like spiritually in tune. I'm super grateful for that. Like, just taught me all the values I needed to live as a good citizen and good member of society. But I just had this desire to go off and experience a life where I didn't necessarily tie any beliefs to a higher power. In the back of my mind, I always knew that was something important I'd probably come back to.
Interesting.
But I lived a life that was very vain, didn't have much, substance. I loved to go out and party, live that lifestyle. It always left me kind of feeling empty.
Okay.
So, I'd say about 9 months ago, I just was at a period of my life and I asked myself, where am I going with this? Like, what am I doing with my life? Especially right when I came home from my mission, I had a very strong sense of purpose. I had very strong direction or an idea of where I wanted my life to go. Very black and white for me.
It turns out life is a lot more complicated than you think when you're 21 years old, dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've learned it's just a lot more gray than that. So going back to those questions that I was asking myself, it kind of led me back to thinking, like, what point in my life was I the happiest? What point in my life did I have the most direction, purpose, and just zeal for the future? And I know peace surrounding all those thoughts.
Yeah.
And at that point in my life, I didn't have that same peace that I had when I came home, I guess, from my LDS mission, when I was very in tune with a higher power. So tapping back into that, I think the biggest realization that I've had, how that's impacted me, is just the daily peace and comfort that comes from believing in something more than just like our physical state, on earth. Knowing that everything that I'm doing now is working towards or improving, myself for something even bigger and greater. Even though, we don't see it, we have no idea what that's going to be like, but just having that comfort and that peace that it's all for something, family, the relationships that you make. Man, I have such a strong feeling, more recently surrounding all the connections and people that you meet. I believe that will all extend past, like our mortal earthly phase.
Yeah. That's way cool, man. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to me, just this part of the human experience and this idea of, I don't know, there being more to what we see and more to what all of our other senses can make of. And I think it's a big jump to thinking that the choices we make can somehow matter after this experience is over. I think that's a pretty big leap.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of faith, takes a lot for just a person to buy into. So that's really interesting to hear about.
Even
your journey.
to just comprehend that as a possibility.
Yeah. And to even think about it like rationally or logically, like how logical is it based on how I define every other aspect of truth in the world? How logical is it for me to say that is truth, that there's more to this experience? So it's interesting to hear people in their faith journeys and stuff. So.
Yeah, I think also, if you, and people all over the world have different beliefs, different ideas of, what their higher power is. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I think the great thing about believing in a higher power is it promotes you to do good things. It promotes you to live a life that is a bit more, I know, in my opinion, I'd say meaningful. I look at a lot of the people that I would hang out with when I didn't necessarily have a strong belief in a higher power, and there just wasn't as much substance. Like, it was all just kind of a day by day, not care so much about tomorrow or the good things that I do. But I look at my life when I do believe or manifest those things daily, like, I am so much more influenced by myself, and I believe that it's the higher power influencing me too. It's God, to just make a difference. Like, go do something worthwhile. Go be better. Go help somebody.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Go live where you stand. However that is.
Love that, man. What are some things, now that you have lived through some experiences? We're both young, but what are some things that you are very grateful for that you think a lot of people might take for granted if they're not appreciated?
Man, for me, it all circles back to family. Yeah, like, really does. I lived with I was lucky enough to live really close to all my family, my parents, my sister, my grandparents. My dad's side, they're all in Sweden.
Right.
So impossible to live close to them right now.
You ever visit them at all, or been out there? Or no?
I've been to Sweden once when I was about 11.
Okay.
Right after we adopted my sister, we brought her to go see my dad's side of the family.
Where was she adopted from? I never asked.
Yeah, no, she was adopted from China. It's called
Cool.
Chaohu, actually.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Her, what the nursery or the nuns told us was her mom dropped her off on the orphanage doorstep one day, and they took her in. China, they went through I don't know if this is still a thing. It very well could be, where families could only have one child, and if they had more, or it might have just been one. Yeah, I think it was just one child. And then there was a period where if they had a girl, they would abort that baby, or you can piece together the rest.
This is in recent history.
Yeah, this is within like the last 15 to 20 years.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a tangent and explore this. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, they were trying very hard to control their population and what kind of people. They wanted a strong workforce of strong males, right? Strong military. So
That's interesting.
I know it really is quite sad.
Well, I also think about like scientifically and like what you can know about your baby before it's born, and you can know about what it's in its genome. You can know about what illnesses it might be predisposed to. You might know what I don't know, strengths or weaknesses that can exist based on, I don't know. There's all kinds of crazy things science can predict.
Prior to them being born, yeah.
And I guess it's just not in America, right? But I guess over there, that's so interesting. So they really aborted or prioritized certain features. That's way interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I can't help but, for me, I think about how lucky my family is to be able to have her in our family. But I also think about how, in some way, and we don't know what her life would have been like if she stayed in China, or her mother didn't drop her off at that orphanage. Like how lucky she is to be able to, I guess, partake of a different lifestyle in the U.S. with both parents, being in a financially stable home. Like all of those things are just something we don't know.
It's a great point.
What the other outcome would have been for her. It could have been better. It could have been much worse. We have no idea. So ultimately, my family is just really grateful to have had the opportunity to foster her and adopt her. Like my whole life, I've never considered her like. Yeah, she is adopted, but in my eyes, it's just my sister. It's my family.
So is that that probably is what plays into what you're grateful for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just being away from my family, going back to that original question, I've realized that how lucky I am to just have them, to have both my parents still alive, both my grandparents. I haven't experienced any deaths in my family like my whole life. I've been really, really lucky. And not everybody has that opportunity of having both parents, or just having any siblings in general. Like that's something that I've taken for granted, my whole life. But the older I get, the more I realize like that is the single most important thing in life is your family, Another thing I think people take for granted is being able to like move your body. Like so many people are born without an arm or without hearing, they're blind. They have an accident where they can't do physical activity, become paralyzed, whatever it is. Like I get to wake up every day and I get to choose to go to work, to go to the gym, go all these places without being inhibited by my body. Like that is...
It's a great point. I haven't thought about that in a long time. That's a great point.
And, in today's day and age, it's really easy to abuse, our bodies just with what we eat, drink. I think, especially I'm thinking about, not to get into conspiracies or politics or anything like that. I think about Big Pharma and just all the ways that humans are medicating themselves, how that plays a big impact.
You don't want to get me started on that, bro. I got strong thoughts. I think I'm with you on a lot.
We'll have to get into that another day. That'd be a fun topic.
Yeah, dude.
Just being able to have all my arms and limbs, being able to talk, full function of my brain, like those are all things that the more experiences I have in life, the more people I meet, circumstances I get to learn about, it just circles me back to that thought of like, I am just so grateful to have that ability to move, like I don't think that's something people rarely think about.
That's great. And a thing that goes along with that is that, now that that you're aware and acknowledge and appreciate that privilege you have is to do something about it. Like you have a responsibility to take care of your body because you're not born with messed up problems like a lot of people are. You didn't have an accident like a lot of people did. Like you have a duty to take care of it. Same thing with, I mean, visiting a third world country when I was a teenager and seeing just how lucky my life was. Is like, okay, I don't know why I get to have this privilege, but it's my responsibility to do something about that and not make a waste of my life. You know what I mean?
It's true. I was really lucky growing up to get to go. Like my family, we got to go to China when we adopted my sister.
Sick, dude. How old were you?
I was about 7.
Okay, that's old enough to appreciate. That's sick.
Yeah, like I remember that whole trip really vividly.
How did your parents get in contact with this opportunity to adopt a child in China?
Yeah, dude, that's another good question.
I want to get into that real quick.
My mom is just so amazing. She's made a ton of connections throughout life. My mom was single till she's about 37, 38. So she got married really late. So she just met a ton of people, you know, being single, living that very active social lifestyle, without kids or things to distract her. She had a family friend who wasn't able to have children, and all of her kids are adopted. She adopted about 5 kids. And when my parents got to that age, you know, they had me and weren't able to have any more kids after they tried. You know, she talked to her, and they had adopted a few children from China. I think it was when it was a lot cheaper of an option, and that was a place that very, very much needed people to adopt.
Yeah.
Just because of the calamity that was going on at the moment.
Sure.
I think it still is. As far as the details of how they got in contact with that specific orphanage, I couldn't tell you.
Sure, but that she got connections. She knew someone that knew someone.
And had done it before.
Yeah,
you know.
It's also very trusting. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're super, super close with their family. They live somewhere here in the boonies in Utah. They're great people.
Of course, the great people live in Utah. Makes sense.
Yes, a ton of great people in Utah.
So sorry about that. Back to your trip. When you're 7, you're going to China to get your sister.
Yeah. No, I just really remember looking at how people there lived. In China, you know, it's a very they control their population really, really closely. Everything they do, like they control how many kids you have. They control the whole education system. They don't have a lot of the freedoms that we do in the States. That's another thing that, you know, at a young age, I didn't process in that moment, but looking back on it, I've been able to just look and compare and realize like how lucky we are.
Yeah.
Like, dude, we won the lottery.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And what part of China was this?
So before no, that's a good question. Before we picked her up, we traveled all over. Like I got to go walk the Great Wall when I was 7. That was
sick.
A cool experience. Got like a little token for doing
Heck
that.
Yeah,
got to see the Forbidden City. I forget exactly what those cities were, but got to go to Beijing, Shanghai, and then where my sister Emma is from, she was adopted from Chaohu. I believe that's where the orphanage was.
Well, you mentioned, you know, the Chinese government in control and stuff, and I don't pretend to know all that, but from what I understand is I know that there's like Hong Kong, which is like its own kind of thing. They have like their own kind of rules.
Yeah.
And then there's like Taiwan that like they think they're a separate country, but like China doesn't think they're a separate country.
Yeah.
And then there's like, I don't know, the rest of China, which I think is this scenario you're describing. So I'd be curious if anybody out there knows to let me know. But okay, so it sounds like she's probably from the more intense,
she's from
messed
communist
up part of China.
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah. Kind of interesting with China and Taiwan. It's just similar with what's going on with like Russia and Ukraine. You know, Ukraine is a sovereign nation, their own country for many years, but Russia still believes that they, you know, own Ukraine, should be a part of Russia.
I don't even know that. That's what Russia thought. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, at one point it was part of Russia.
Yeah, I don't know all the history of it. I know Ukraine's been around for a long time, but I didn't know that's what Russia thinks, that Ukraine is Russia.
Yeah, or should be, anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing going on with Taiwan. It's interesting to see. I'm sure, you know, in the near future there will be some drama around that. But
positive, yeah. But so you picked her up from that area, and as a kid, that's kind of what helped you appreciate that. It's good to have that experience when you're young, dude, because like otherwise you're gonna be a spoiled brat like I was.
Yeah.
I don't think I was actually a spoiled brat, but I just didn't appreciate so many things until I had already grown up a lot, and I was like, oh.
Do you have a lot of siblings?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 6.
The oldest of 6?
Yeah,
okay,
dude.
Yeah. I'm the oldest too. You know,
that's what I'm talking about.
Oldest always gets a little spoiled for a few years. You know? Yeah. I definitely say I was spoiled for a good 7 years until, my sister was adopted.
Until she came along.
Yeah, until she came along, right? That's definitely what I thought when I was studying. I was like, oh, gosh, dang it, like I'm not going to get all the attention, all the benefit of that. But, my parents were very, very much wanted a bigger family, and they were just so excited to have me, period. My mom was almost 40 when I was born. Like, that was a miracle in itself. And, like, they were just very appreciative to have kids and children in general. And they've lived that same attitude, all growing up. Like, I just so lucky to have the parents that I do. Adopting in general, I think could speak miles to what kind of people they are. But yeah, just in general, grateful to have them.
That's awesome, man. And that's cool that you have those perspectives from a young age. What would you say to somebody out there who might be struggling to find their meaning and purpose?
I really like that question because I still am, at this moment. I think that's a lifelong, process.
Not that like you have it all figured out, but you might have more figured out than some people, and you want to impart your wisdom.
Yeah, I think looking at it that way, I think there's just been so many pivots, so many moments in life where I've thought I wanted to do one thing one way or pursue a certain goal a certain way, and it didn't either work out or pan out how I wanted it to, and that cloud can just overcome you, and you can get depressed in a low, start going back to that negative self-talk. For someone who's trying to find their purpose and, I don't know, meaning in life, best advice I have is to just keep reminding yourself how much you want that. That desire, I think, to become something more and to make more of yourself is what has pushed me to kind of find a bigger purpose, or just a stronger direction in my life. Is like, hey, I want to become the best version of myself that I can. And no matter how many times I fall short, reminding myself at how much I want that has always brought me right back to where I need to be. At times you might not have the greatest desire. You might be struggling with, depression or feeling really anxious, getting back into that comparison mindset, but just reminding yourself how much you actually desire that, how much you want that. That want is going to push you to accomplish more than you thought you're capable of. Do things that you didn't, break habits, just things that you couldn't fathom you were capable of. We all have this potential to be amazing, no matter what you are, who you are, what background you come from. And being able to tap into that is just something really beautiful. But we all have that potential. But it just starts with a desire, and that desire can be really, really small or it can be great. But as long as there's a desire there and you just keep going and do absolute best that you know how to do, because we all know how to do that in a different way.
Yeah.
That's going to push you to just become eventually what you want and have the things you want.
That's a great answer. That's great advice out there for people. How about, is there anything that you fear in life, some of your biggest fears you hold on to still, whether it's now or for the future?
Yeah, it's such a funny, thing when I've had a few people ask me that recently.
Interesting.
I don't know why or what prompted them to ask that. A few of them were like the younger guys, in my branch that asked me that randomly. And I was like, I have to think about that. But ultimately, I think my biggest fear is settling for less, is giving up. I think about a lot of instances in my life, whether it was my mission, when I embarked on like the sales journey. I was right off my mission. I had like I said before, very clear outlook on what I thought my life was going to be, and it didn't go that way. And at so many times I just wanted to give up and like, what does it matter? What's the point of it all? But I didn't, I didn't give up. I looked back at kind of like that desire to become something more. So my biggest fear is to, I think, get stuck in that mindset of giving up, like losing the zeal for life, or losing the attitude of improvement every day. Like if that makes sense, what I'm trying to get at. Like,
yes, becoming complacent, losing that I don't know, love of life, love of improving and growing. No, I totally feel that.
Yeah, like where I'm at in life, there's so many things I have yet to, accomplish, things I want to do, see, uh, create, and I never want to stop having that excitement or that zeal for the future. Um, Being able to look forward to something.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So what about in your life? What's, looking back, the greatest and most kind thing someone has done for you?
There's so many things people have done to like really, I don't know, bless my life or make an impact. I think I've been so lucky to have really good friends, just people who have been in my life for a long time and have stayed. I I think looking back to when I was a kid, this is not necessarily something one person did. It was a family actually. It was when my dad, like I said, he started smoking cigarettes when he was 11, eventually quit. Um, but when I was about 15, he got throat cancer. And him and my mom, they moved away to Houston for about a year and a half. So it was just me, my sister, my grandma would come down and make us meals, kind of take care of us every now and again.
Wow, okay. You're 15.
Yeah, so I was pretty young to go through, a parent with cancer. I mean, could be younger, but this was a very pivotal point, in my life. I was kind of figuring things out. I was
Well,
just
yeah, you're still in high school. How long did you live without them for?
about a year and a half.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so it was quite a while. I was just starting to date at that time. I was getting into sports. I was going through puberty. That's tough enough in
There you
itself.
go.
Um, I was trying to figure out, spiritually where I was. If the things my parents were teaching me were things that I believed. I was just going through a lot, right? I think as most 15-year-olds would. Um, and I didn't have that safety net of my parents to necessarily be there. But I'll never forget the Christmas, the first Christmas that we had spent away from them. Um, and just for a bit more background, this is still a few years after the 2009 crash. My parents were trying to get back on their feet. Um, we're renting a house. My dad is still working his butt off. He installed security for ADT for about 20 something years. So it's a home service business, and home services really struggled after
Sure.
the crash. So, money's still tight. They're trying to figure it out. And then, boom, my dad gets hit with cancer. So, this first Christmas where they're away, my parents kind of prepped me and my sister, like, hey, we're going to come home for Christmas, but there's not going to be any gifts. There's not going to be any big presents this year like we've always done, right? And being a spoiled little kid, I'm just like, gosh, I'm not gonna get any presents. Like that was the biggest thing in my mind. I was worried about presents. Like, come on. Looking back, it's funny, but I was just expecting nothing big or crazy. And we grew up in a really awesome church, good family of people surrounding that community. And everybody in our church, they did know like what we were going through. And I'll never forget. It was Christmas Eve. My bedroom was on the second story of our house, and the window was kind of looking to the front, like front facing of the house, where you could see people walking up to the door. If you looked out, you could see the mailman. And man, it had to be like 11 o'clock at night. And I don't know what prompted me or why I looked out the window. And I was a gamer. I was usually just glued to the TV playing video games.
Yeah.
I see this van pull up, and the trunk opens. Your mom and dad get out and all their kids, and they just start unloading. They just start unloading presents, and they start putting it on our front, like a front porch, the front door. And even being 15, I couldn't just. I just broke down. I just started crying, in my room by myself. I just felt so grateful that someone else would do that, for my family. I don't know how they knew we needed that.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, we didn't need all those gifts or presents, but it was such a nice gesture. And I just felt the love of God at that moment. I felt the love of, my church community, and just a feeling like, yeah, when hard things happen, there are other people to help lift you up. You don't need to do it all on your own. And I've always thought back to that experience. I've only shared it a few times. But one of the strongest memories I have of service or kindness that anybody ever showed was that moment when someone from our church community just went and dropped off tons of gifts. Like that, looking back, that Christmas was still the Christmas where I received the most, in more ways than just physical gifts.
Yeah, I'm sure you appreciate it a ton more too. That's awesome, man. That's an awesome story. I love hearing about communities coming together like that, dude.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know. If I might, I could share one more experience
Please,
I had
please.
with you that kind of embodies this whole thing. And I guess if there's anyone, listening, one thing I want you to know is kind of bases back to the story. But right before I went out on, my LDS mission, I was getting, we call it set apart in our church. Everybody in my family, my church leader asked them all to say something, something meaningful, kind of share their thoughts on what I was doing. I was 19, I'm 26 now, so like maybe 7, 8 years ago. I don't really remember much of what anyone else said, in that moment. They all said great things. I remember that. I remember how I felt. But my grandma, she spoke the least out of anybody. But she said, above all things, just whatever you do, just be kind. Just lift others, look outwards all the time, and you will be uplifted, as a result. It's really interesting how and I tried to embody that, over the span of my mission. I still try to this day to do that.
Yeah.
Just be kind, over everything. Just be kind, be nice to people. You don't know who you're passing by that might be having a hard day or a tough time. But if you're just kind, you give people a smile all the time, you can have such a great impact more than you know.
I love that, man. And I think you do I love that, man. And I think you do a good job of that too, because it's interesting to think about how people think about you, because you're with you all the time. Other people only think about you based on their however many number of interactions they spend with you. Like, how many total hours of time have you and I spent together in our lives? Maybe a couple, maybe like meetings or like once a week, little things. But like
Sure.
you think about people just based on your experience with them, or maybe things you hear or whatever. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think the way I think about you is I think of the word kindness, dude. Like I think you do a great job of that. And I think, I don't know, you're not someone that I think is like, oh, dude, he's gonna be pissed at me, or he's I don't know. I mean, we joke, we whatever, but like you, I think are very much, you do a great job of that. Is what I'm trying to say. So
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
It's awesome.
I think, something that goes hand in hand with kindness is also just forgiveness, second chances, not holding grudges or taking anything personally. Humans are imperfect, and if we keep that in mind every day, it's a lot easier to be kind and forgiving and just give people the benefit of the doubt, all the time. I'm a lot happier when I live my life that way. So I hope other people will do that too.
That's fantastic advice, man. That's a great thing to say. So in closing, Matt, what's something that you wish you could leave on the world before you die? The impact you want to leave behind someday?
Man, that's the golden question, isn't it? Everybody wants to, like I said, be remembered for something. That one thing is it's fluid for me. I think it's always changing. Like what is the actual impact that I'm capable of leaving behind for the next generation? Or I think people oftentimes think about what they can create too when they're thinking about something they can leave behind. For me, when I think about wanting to create something or leave something behind, I just want to leave behind to my family or the people that knew me and were closest to me. I want them to remember just the values and the principles that I was able either to leave as an example or prompt them or urge them to just do better, to be better. Like I'm so imperfect, but I'd like to think I can promote people to just do all those things, be a little bit kinder, be a little bit more forgiving, and just strive to like become something. I think about my family, my future family. Like if I'm dead and my kids are thinking about, what was grandpa like? I'd hope that I just have really good attributes and qualities for them to remember me by, and hopefully some good stories and examples too.
That's great, man. And you're doing it now. You're on the right path.
Appreciate
Keep
it.
it up. You're a beast.
I'm trying.
It's great having you on the show, man. Thanks for being a person of Utah and
Good to be here, man.
coming over from California to the better state. Glad you agree. Stay as long as you'd like.
Yes, I'll see myself staying for the foreseeable future. That's for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for coming on. This was fun.
Thanks, dude. This was a blast, man.
All right,
I
have
love
a
it.
good one.